With me today is Megan Ribbons, and Matthew Humphrey will be joining us shortly. We have some good topics for you today. We're going to be discussing the accident that killed Prigozhin. If I'm pronouncing it right, it's Russian, I don't know. But we're going to discuss that. We're also going to discuss the potential for colonizing Mars, and we're going to be discussing the debate from last night. The Republican debate, for those of you who don't know. So we're going to start with colonizing Mars. And luckily, we have a biologist with us who can tell us some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that are involved there. So without further ado, Megan, let us know.
Yeah, all right. Let me preface by saying that I'm not an astrobiologist. Like you said, I'm a biologist. I have been obsessed with Mars since about 8th grade. That's when I read Robert Zuprin's Case for Mars. Let me just start by recommending it. I can't speak to the feasibility of, he makes a lot of recommendations about specific things you could do to colonize Mars soon and cheaply. And to be frank, I don't have a right to much of an opinion there because, again, I'm not a physicist, I'm not an engineer. All of those things he sort of leverages. He does talk a lot about what he calls living off the land on Mars. So he thinks you could get a crew of 4 to survive on Mars for the time it would take to use the most efficient amount of rocket fuel to get to Earth and back. So he's recommending that 4 people go to Mars and stay there for about 2 years. And there's a very good reason for that. There's something called the Hohmann transfer. So when Mars and Earth are on opposite sides of the sun, I think I'm getting that right. It's the cheapest, rocket fuel wise, it's the cheapest time to start making your journey to Mars because, as you're flying away from Earth, right, Mars is kind of catching up behind you, and that's a good time to kind of meet and land. So with regard to the article that Razi sent out, I was super excited about, they talk about more than just humans visiting Mars and leveraging its resources to survive and thrive. They talk about what it would take to actually sustain a colony indefinitely. And mostly what they were talking about was what we would need in terms of people resources, which is the most valuable resource. I don't have an opinion about that. They said 22 people, fantastic. And I hope I'm recapitulating his argument. What Zuprin and others have proposed is, you start with 4, and maybe they skip the first Hohmann transfer and they stay for 4 years instead of 2. And in the meantime, another Hohmann transfer is leveraged and you get a group of 4 to come. And, you sort of, eventually they go home for the most part, but some of them stay and they start staying longer and maybe they stay indefinitely. I just love that idea. Okay, but I've gone on and Daniel always yells at me for doing that. So I'm going to kick it back to you for a second, because I'm pretty sure Daniel, wherever he is right now, is actually pouring his Bud Light Tall Boy into his top rum. And please give us super chats to make sure that never happens again. Michael, why did you agree to talk about this?
I really wasn't given the option. I was told to talk about it. So I don't know if I mean, I agreed to do the show and that was there, but it actually is something that interests me. Maybe 22 years ago, I read a book called The Ultimate Resource 2 by the economist Julian Simon. And he was talking about how the idea that the Earth would run out of resources, which a lot of doomsayers in the Malthusian orbit were predicting at the time, and still are, and much before that. And he said, it's just nonsense. It's not going to happen. And one of the things he pointed out was, even if that were the case, the ultimate resource is the mind of people, human minds. And he said we could colonize another planet. I mean, it's not out of the question. And I said, well, why couldn't we? I mean, right now, especially when I read it, it seemed ridiculous. But in the long term, why would it be ridiculous? I mean, we've been to the moon, we've been to, well, we haven't, but somebody had that resembled me in some way.
Not yet.
Yeah. But so I think it's a great idea. I think it has a lot of promise and a lot of promise to advance human knowledge. It to me, it's kind of reminiscent of the discussion we had the other day, or I think it was yesterday, about AI. I just think the technology, it's funny because I'm totally technologically not savvy, but I do think technology is just an awesome thing, and it really advances human well-being and human promise. And I think it's a great idea. I'm hoping it happens. I don't know if I'd go. I think I'd get kind of bored, but for those that would go, I wish them the best.
For those who have ever read The Martian by Randy Weir, did you ever read it?
No, but I've heard of it. Is
Oh,
that
it's
the
so
movie? The
good.
movie's
And
based on the book, right?
yeah, the book is so much better. Yeah, it was such a treat listening to it. The audio version is fantastic. Yeah, if you ever read The Martian, at least if you follow any trajectory, see what I did there? That's for you, Robert. That's space fun for you. So if you follow the trajectory of the protagonist, one thing you will definitely not be on Mars is bored. You might die, but you will not be bored doing it. You will definitely not die of boredom. Sorry, that's a bit silly, but I was gonna make the case for just a couple of concretes as to why I think human space exploration is likely to be very, very valuable. And you said something so wonderful. Well, you say a lot of wonderful things, but one of the things you said I really, really liked was this idea of you know, always discovering new resources we can convert into something wonderful. So one concrete example of that, and this is a very ambitious project, is what's called terraforming. Mars is not very hospitable to human life for a couple of reasons. There's not a lot of ozone, which is what does most of the absorbing of the mutagenic ultraviolet radiation. So let me back up a second. Light, photons, comes in all sorts of energies, right? We can see from red to blue, which is, a pretty narrow range of energies, but each color is associated with a different energy of light. The higher energy stuff, the higher energy light tends to fall under ultraviolet, X-ray, gamma, the stuff that can be really damaging to life in a lot of ways. There's a lot of ultraviolet and more high energy, more DNA damaging and protein damaging than what you do when you go for a tan in a tanning booth. There's a lot of it on Mars. So the idea of making Mars another Earth, making it hospitable to life without the need for a habitat, for example, and significant infrastructure, is a colossal project, but it would tell us so much. So for example, there's a lot of open questions with regard to anthropogenic climate change, right? What is our contribution of CO2 and what is its effect in terms of plant growth, the use of the requirements of water for plants in the presence of more or less CO2. In a complex hydrology system, what's the effect of more CO2? Now, in a place where there isn't a complex hydrology system and quite a bit more as a percentage of CO2, of atmospheric CO2 on Mars, this would be an excellent text subject, right? You've essentially isolated a whole bunch of variables and you can really hone in on what it takes to make an entire planet a degree warmer.
Megan, hold on one second. Okay, you're putting out a lot of words that I'm guessing people don't know what they mean, right? So I'm just wondering. So, what are the risks and the challenges? Can you put it in sort of layman's terms? So what would be the first thing, for instance, that we would have to do up there? What are the risks? How about long-term exposure to living in a different atmosphere, that sort of thing?
That's a really excellent question. And in terms of just being an astronaut, visiting Mars for a couple of years, we have a pretty good idea of what the risks would be simply because people have lived in the International Space Station for years. So they haven't had the benefit of a lot of the Earth's atmosphere protecting them from the very high energy radiation coming from the sun and from other suns in the galaxy. So in terms of radiation, we do have some idea of what they'd expect, and we know that humans are incredibly adaptable. We also know quite a bit about, so if we're expecting that transit to and from Mars will be microgravity, almost zero gravity, whereas Earth is one, right? We just arbitrarily set it to one. If you're flying to Mars, you may be doing it in zero. You don't have to, but you can. We also know that people are pretty adaptable when it comes to that too. There are people who spent months or a year on the International Space Station in microgravity. They get home, and a couple days later, sometimes they're playing tennis. So, in terms of the challenges, a lot of it, there's still a lot we want to know, both in terms of radiation amelioration, low gravity. For instance, we don't have a good idea of what happens in 39% gravity, which is what Mars is compared to Earth. There may be some sort of synergistic effect there that we just don't know about. I don't want to speak arbitrarily, but it's one of the opportunities to learn. I think probably, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, one of the biggest challenges will be that we need to take all or most of our water with us, at least in the beginning, and most of our food. And I think those, and we need a pretty robust source of energy. I think those will be our biggest challenges. And again, it's the ultimate homesteading challenge, right? Like, because, on Earth, if you homestead, it's not easy. If you're just trying to build yourself a shelter in Death Valley, you're going to have a hard go of it. And even there's more water and less radiation and more life to eat, for example, than on Mars.
What there is on Mars, yeah.
Exactly so. But that would tell us an awful lot about how to make even places on Earth more habitable. Sorry, again, I feel like,
okay.
Yeah, no,
well,
Daniel.
No,
no,
we got, we no,
putting
it's okay.
Another tall boy into his right. Top ramen.
We have Matthew now too. Matthew is here to rescue us, so we don't have to do all the talking. Matthew, what are your thoughts on this subject? Uh-oh. Okay, Matthew, it seems, is having technical difficulties. Can you hear me, Matthew? Nod. Okay, there you are.
Hi.
All right. So what?
Can you
what
hear
are your
me?
thoughts?
Yeah, cool.
We can hear you. You going to Mars with us?
First of all, sorry for the late link up. I had a issue. Long story. Here I am.
We'll blame Rozzy. Don't worry about it.
Looks like you lost part of your beard just to get here.
Sorry?
You lost part of your beard just to get here.
I had my quarterly beard trim, as I call it, at the weekend.
Excellent. I heard a rumor that I just made up now that you're going to wear your wig at some point. Does that mean yes? Are you going to wear your court wig for us at some point?
A powdered wig? Come on. You have a powdered wig?
I do.
Oh, I've got to say this. Okay. We bring the powdered wig to Mars with us. So what are your thoughts on Mars? Powdered wig or no powdered wig? It's optional.
What are my thoughts on Mars? I'd love to go there. Like genuinely. The science of it, I'll be the first to say I'm just not an expert on. There was this fascinating film done, I guess about 3-4 years ago, called The Martian, that I think originally may have been based on a novel, but it's actually about an astronaut who basically gets accidentally left behind on Mars.
From what I just heard, the book is much better than the movie.
Oh, really? I have to
I've
say,
never read
I
or
haven't
seen
read
any.
I haven't read the book.
Oh,
I
good. We get
loved
two
the film.
perspectives.
I loved the film. Took a very, I thought, very rational and kind of scientific approach to the whole situation. Certainly, in the kind of protagonist's mentality of it. That as soon as he, 'cause essentially, he is thrown unconscious in a unexpected sandstorm, and the equipment monitoring his life signs is damaged. So the rest of his crew members who are on the rocket trying to take off all think that he's dead. Basically take off without him because they're in a situation where they're in danger of the rocket being toppled over by the sandstorm. And then, of course, a few hours later, this poor guy wakes up and realizes everyone's left without him and has to figure out how to survive by himself on the surface of Mars.
So this is one example of what makes the book so great, right? Because you know that the whole premise of the book is that there is a single astronaut marooned on another planet. Here's the first line of the book. So I'm pretty much effed. That's my considered opinion. Effed. That's not quite a direct quote, but close enough. And when I read, so I'm pretty much effed, that's my considered opinion, I thought, I have found my people.
Sounds like my life story. Okay. All right. So does anyone have anything to add? Are we ready to move on to Prigozhin?
We do have some super chats if you guys don't mind me reading them.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. All right. So the first one is from Quent Cordair Fine Art. Linda, I hope you're feeling better. She's a little under the weather. So yeah, we're thinking about you. So for $5, thank you very much. Brian Larson has been concretizing life on Mars beautifully at Quent Cordair Fine Art. Visit the Cordair Gallery anytime you need a lift. Madam, yeah, no, I agree. I love the art of Brian Larson, particularly the space themed. I've been dying to get something for my daughter because I try to surround her with art that makes it clear that the universe is her oyster. And to prove it, I took my whole family to the Air and Space Museum in DC for her 4th birthday. So thank you, Quent Cordair Fine Art Gallery. Next one is from Robert Naser for $2. Thank you so much. Very smooth, Dr. Ribbons, you rock it. I'm with Robert. I love dad jokes and I love terrible puns. Just for that, I'll tell you one from when I was working with, we were amplifying DNA to detect COVID. And part of what we need are what we call primers. And like the slang is probes, right? And we were worried that there was a little bit of it that was contaminated. So I texted my boss and said, I'm not sure about these probes. I'm going to put them on probation. She texted me back. Sorry, I'm laughing at my own joke. She texted me back and said, I regret that I laughed as hard as I did, but I did laugh. All right. So another one from Robert Naser. Next Cordair Fine Art location, Herschel Crater. I'm with ya. I'm there. Okay, and then for $40.99, American Greenback, Enric Teller says, Megan, what are the possibilities for bioengineering DNA, mRNA, etc., humans to thrive on other planets? I am so glad you asked. Thank you so much for your super chat. I actually am working on gene therapy now. There are some significant challenges, even with ameliorating genetic diseases. So for example, our patients tend to be quite young because we're trying to put them on the developmental track, the healthiest developmental track as soon as possible, because the longer you wait, the more some of that is cemented, and it's even harder to ameliorate. So what that might entail, if you were to genetically engineer people to be able to breathe in a 95% CO2 atmosphere. We don't do well in 1% CO2 atmosphere. Fortunately, we're not even at 0.01%. So that's good. Right. So the other problem we have, generally speaking, with genetic engineering generally is that it's very difficult to get more than a tiny piece of DNA. If you think of, we have about 20,000 human genes, right? Each one of them is like a recipe for a different kind of food. Except that for us, it's a different kind of protein that does the job of living. We can't even get a whole recipe into people very easily right now. We have to sort of pick out one sentence of one recipe of the 20,000 needed to do the job of living. So significantly altering the human genome is I would say at this point, it's probably easier to get people to Mars and build infrastructure for Earth life than to engineer people to be more Martian. But that may change. Do we want to, I mean, I could go on and on about Mars, but I feel like we've got a couple other topics.
We do. The next
right.
topic is this Prigozhin. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. If I'm not, I guess it really doesn't matter. The guy who led the Wagner group in the uprising in Russia, he's no more. I don't know. Is this a surprise? Do we think Putin? I think, do we guess Putin might have had something to do with it? Is it just an accident? What are the thoughts on this? Matthew, take us away. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think a lot of people were surprised after the uprising that Prigozhin seemed to have just been basically allowed to sort of walk away from it all without any kind of sort of comeback from Putin or from the authorities. So I mean, I guess we need more information, I suppose, on what exactly has caused the aircraft to come down. But one does have to wonder whether something sort of untoward is going on here in terms of Putin trying to get back at Prigozhin, I guess.
Is
there like Putin, a black box? I mean, do we know if there was sabotage?
Something just came across my screen, a notification from the New York Times that said there has been a blast reportedly linked to the crash. I didn't see what kind of blast, but a blast. But I do know this, that either Putin's a really bad guy or people that cross him have really bad luck, because they end up poisoned, dead, in prison, all kinds of things.
Falling out of windows.
Yeah, but I actually have sort of a different question that I want to explore about this is, does it even matter? I mean, he's a bad guy. I get it. He's horrible. There's a lot of them out there, right? But what does that, like, how as Americans, if we're going to be voting, we got presidents and, we have a military, how do we deal with somebody like Putin? Like, I don't, for instance, see the need to back Ukraine. I mean, I think they're victims of Putin, but I don't think that they're a liberty-minded government who's over there fighting for the rights of people. I think they're fighting for their land, or what they perceive to be their land. I mean, it's Ukrainian land. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm implying. I'm just saying that I don't see the point of getting involved in these sort of things, whether Putin's a murderer, a dictator, whatever. What do you guys think? I know I kind of switched up the question a little bit. I'm sorry if I've broken the rule, but it just seems, I mean, we all can agree Putin's bad, right? And something probably happened to Prigozhin. I'm just wondering, what are the implications for us? Megan, Matthew,
Well,
3 M's. I just realized.
going back a few years, there have been at least 2 incidents in England where Russian dissidents who had sort of based themselves here were effectively, all the evidence suggests, assassinated by Russian agents. Right, so this isn't just, we all agree he's a horrible guy, but this isn't just somebody who's sort of invading a next door neighbor country. This guy is sending, the evidence suggests, is sending his assassins overseas, certainly into England, to murder people who've stood up in opposition to him, and that to me is incredibly frightening. I think I don't mean necessarily an invasion of Russia, but I think something certainly needs to be done about it. The international community need to be, standing up to this behaviour and trying somehow to constrain him.
Yeah, see, I agree with you. I just wonder what can be done or what should be done.
Yeah, sure.
Because the governments, it's not as if they say, implacably, Russia is our enemy and that's it. You know what I mean? And we're going to have some type of a war with them. They play negotiations, friendship, maybe they put some, boycotts on them or strictures on them, things of that nature. But in the end, it's really nothing. If Putin sends his spies or his killers to England or Great Britain, and the British government says, okay, we're going to do something about this. We're going to hit their infrastructure. We're going to hit their technology, something. I would say, okay, but that doesn't seem to even be part of the question. It's this thing where the people finger wag and then maybe send some money here and there. And that to me seems pointless, and it also antagonizes and creates further problems, where if you're going to fight them, that's how I see it. I don't know. Megan, what do you think?
I mean, what I would like most of all is for Russia to have no nuclear weapon capability. I think it's great that they have some nuclear energy.
Is that an option?
That's just it. As I have no idea how on earth that could be accomplished. So probably the next best thing is for them to have a brain drain, because you have to be pretty clever to maintain and certainly to build nuclear armaments. So I love to see, I suspect, and I don't want to speak for anybody, I suspect that if you said to a bunch of Russians who were either press ganged into fighting against Ukraine or otherwise wanting to leave Russia, and said, if you want to come to the United States and live here forever and leave everything behind, never go back to Russia, never communicate with anyone from Russia, would you do it? I think a lot would say yes. Now, the whole idea of never communicating with anyone from Russia is tragic, because I'm sure they'd have family there. On the other hand, I think concerns about corporate or political espionage are not without merit. There's certainly precedent, right? In the Cold War, there was corporate and political espionage. And yet I still think there are people in Russia today who would say, yes, I will come to the United States and I will break all communication ties with my past life. That would be a very effective brain drain. So I don't know.
Okay.
I guess I never asked you guys what your thoughts on immigration are. So now is probably a good time to ask.
My thoughts on immigration are on both constitutional grounds and on moral grounds that we should have open borders. I don't see anywhere in the federal constitution of the United States that grants the federal government the authority to limit immigration. The 10th Amendment would, I think, probably allow states to do so. But on moral grounds, I don't see how you tell people you restrict somebody's movement and restrict the rights of Americans with whom they're going to deal. It's just this idea of us and them, like just because I happen to be born on a certain parcel of land separates me from somebody born on a different parcel. I just think is silly. I don't think I have any more rights than anybody else. I don't think that we should be paying for Russians to come over here, or the government should be paying for it. But I am for open immigration. My only thing with what you said about Russia is that Russia, for as far back as I know, which is hundreds of years, maybe even longer than that, has been an autocratic society of one form or another. That just seems to be what they have. I don't to say they like it, I don't know, but it certainly seems to be in their culture. And that's part of the problem, I think, with going after dictators of various countries, is you get rid of one, and it's not like you replace them with these objectivist utopias. You end up with just another autocrat running the show. That's kind of why I throw my hands in the air and say, let them do whatever they're going to. Matthew,
That's
do you
a
have
really
anything?
good point. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, on the immigration question, certainly I agree with you guys. We should have open borders over here in the United Kingdom. In my view, we have this horrible situation at the moment with this effectively sort of people smuggling industry has kind of almost exploded, and we repeatedly are having incidents with these overloaded little boatfuls of people being sent over from continental Europe, and keeps happening every few months that one of the boats capsizes, and half the people drown before the lifeguards are able to, the Coast Guard, I should say, is able to sort of identify what's happened and get a response out there. And it's really tragic. Not that I'm condoning the people smugglers, but obviously that's only happening because we have restrictions on immigration in the first place. It's sort of creating the black market. But in terms of a sort of Russian brain drain, I think you're right, Michael, that Russia basically isn't going to just sort of stand by and allow all these people to sort of migrate if we try to do that, just because of the nature of the government they have there. So while it's a good idea, I don't see how it would actually work in practice.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's a good
Matthew,
point. And I
well, I just want to say that. So Matthew and I are agreed that Megan's wrong. We're voting against Megan on this issue. We're not having.
Sorry, Megan.
I wish I was wrong more often. Yeah, I mean, I to be honest, I agree with what you're both saying. I really hadn't considered and I really have no idea what it would take for people to leave Russia and go anywhere else. It sounds like they're willing to do quite a bit. And I have so much sympathy for that. I mean, if I happened to be born in Russia, I would move heaven and earth to get myself and my daughter out of there. To be perfectly frank, and I I feel so bad saying this, especially on ARCUK. After hearing the story, I think it was earlier this week, about the NHS enabling a nurse to murder infants. After hearing that story, if I had been born in the UK, I'd probably move heaven and earth to get myself, especially if I was pregnant at the time, I would move heaven and earth to get myself out of the UK. I lose everything if I lose my daughter, and I lose everything if she doesn't have a chance to flourish. And there's therefore no price too high to ensure that she has that chance.
Well said.
Okay, I'm creating another show hole, and I think Daniel, so I can hear Daniel's beer cracking somewhere, and it's a Bud Light. I can
Another
hear that.
one. How many Bud Lights is this guy going to drink during the episode?
Gets worse every time I don't pass the conversation along. So we're all agreed that I'm wrong. Can we move on?
Okay, Republican debate. I watch this monstrosity. What I find is every time a Republican says something and I'm like, wow, I agree with that, they then ruin it by saying something I disagree with. And last night, it specifically, there were two things that I really had an issue with. One was this 10th Amendment argument, where for years Republicans have argued that Roe v. Wade was decided incorrectly, and that therefore, what should happen is it should be up to the states because of the 10th Amendment. The states should decide whether abortion is legal or illegal. Now that the court has overturned Roe, the Republicans are saying, well, not so fast on the states' rights thing. Let's have the federal government outlaw abortion. So there's their first hypocrisy. And then the other, where they talked about sending special forces into Mexico to take on cartels. The drug war is a disaster, and it's only made things worse. And they just want to ramp it up. It's just stupidity piled on stupidity. I wouldn't support any of them. Matthew, you're not an American. What's your take on it? We see what Trump's take is on it.
Well, I'm not an American, and I have to say I didn't actually stay up to watch the debate last night. It would have been literally the middle of the night, my time. From what I've seen of the candidates, I think possibly Nikki Haley seems like she might be, I won't say the best, but perhaps the sort of least rubbish candidate, if I can put it that way.
I thought she did well last night, but that's a case in point. What I was just talking about is she starts off by saying the Republicans are the ones who have given you this massive debt. At least they're partly responsible. I thought that was awesome. But then when it comes to foreign policy, she wants money going to Ukraine. She wants money going to Israel. It's just spend, get involved in foreign conflicts, the same hawkish stuff that I just think is wrong on so many levels. And that's what I see wrong with him. Vivek Ramaswamy, I got to tell you, I couldn't stand him. His personality I found very off-putting. I thought he was very phony. It's just a sense. I mean, I don't know the guy, but that was the sense I got, is he's trying to be Trump or Trump light. And he wants to stop people from dealing with China, I guess. That's one of his things. So it's just more and more, let's use the force of government to accomplish what we want. So I think we have Megan back too. She's given us Trump's view on things. Megan, what was your view of the debate?
That was amazing, by the way, Megan.
Why does she get credit? What about me?
Do more bits. Somehow he doesn't take me up on it.
I kept up the commentary all that while with that distraction going on. My goodness.
I knew you would not break. I trusted you guys, and you guys came through. So yeah, with regard to the debate, I hated everything. I was even annoyed with the people. I feel so bad saying this because I don't know these people. But when they would, I think at one point they booed Chris Christie so much that he couldn't finish a sentence. I was just like, can we just quiet down and move on? You know what I mean? It was very frustrating. I was really excited when Vivek talked about essentially, parents having the choice about how their children are educated. I would love to not hemorrhage thousands of dollars on property taxes because I signed Gracie up for chess lessons and coding lessons, and she does horseback riding and swimming. Like, and her I so thoroughly vetted her school, and it's not cheap. There's so much I would love to do to invest in my child, and I can't because that money is taken away from me. And yet when they started talking about, oh gosh, what was it? When they started talking about abortion, or, I think Ben Carson was like, we have a right to life. I'm like, well, a fetus is not alive.
Ben Carson
wasn't
in the debate.
Like, nobody talked about the mom. And I bring this up because the thing and I'm going to circle back to that comment in just a second. The thing that stuck out to me is that they all made a point of talking about some voter and mentioning them by name and concretizing their issue. But aside from that, they talked about their constituency as objects rather than people. And here's how I'm going to concretize that idea. They didn't talk about the families who would benefit from an abortion. And here's an example. There was a family, they already had 2 kids. They were so excited for their 3rd one to come along. They do their 20-week ultrasound, which is very routine. And that's when they discovered that holes had developed in the baby's skull, the fetus's skull, and the brain matter had completely leaked out. The kid wasn't brain dead. The kid had no brain and was not going to survive. It just had a brain stem, so it would still kick, but there was just no chance. And it wasn't because these parents had done anything wrong. It just happened. And imagine
don't tell me they made her deliver to term.
No, but like that is what every single Republican candidate was going to say to this family. Yeah. It's past 15 weeks. You did everything right. You did your routine ultrasound at 20 weeks. Sorry, it's too late. You got to wait another 20 weeks to start healing, right? Their family is grieving. And that's the point, right? Is that I think each one of these Republican candidates would have said, yeah, but that's a rare case. They don't count. No, I'm sorry. They count as much as everybody else. Because they're not objects. They're certainly not statistics. They're people. Sorry, I just got so upset there. It was one of a number of examples where, they talked about statistics like 70% of Americans want X, Y, and Z. And I'm sorry, 70% of Athenians probably wanted Socrates dead. They're still wrong.
Well said. Just because a majority wants it doesn't make it right. I actually, when Vivek was talking about that, I thought it was great that he talked about getting rid of all these federal agencies, but then he talked about cracking down on teachers' unions and to improve education or whatever. But in my view, it's not the government's job to improve education. Under our Constitution, it's certainly not the federal government's job. It would be allowable for state governments to do so. I'm not for that either, but I didn't write the Constitution. And it's just that the Republicans they're all over the place with this stuff. They talk about capitalism, but then violate it. They talk about rights, but then violate them. They talk about the Constitution, but then violate it. And that's why I just don't see any of them that I could support.
Yeah, it was funny because, it sounded like a bunch of them come from single parent homes. And then Vivek says, that single mothers are the scourge of the earth. I am a single mother by choice. And, I don't know if you can see, but there's like nothing but children's books, pretty much as far as, there is no place in our home that you cannot reach out and find a children's book and, and grab one. So when Vivek said that, essentially single mothers are the scourge of the earth, I'm like, yep, here we are, just scourging away. All the
Okay, so
scourges.
we've determined that Megan is not the scourge of the earth. Any final comments before we end the show for today?
Can I just really quickly go back to the Prigozhin topic, because I've just had something flash up from BBC News.
All right.
A source in British intelligence has told BBC News that they believe Russian intelligence were most likely to be responsible for downing the plane. So, not a surprise.
Okay.
We do have a couple more super chats that
All right. Let's hear
love
it.
to read. Everyone's so supportive on this channel. It's so great. Thank you all. Let's see. There's one for $5 from Robert Naser, another super chat just because Megan actually knows how to properly pronounce Naser. Naser. Also, yay, sir. Also, happy birthday, Jeff Bannister. Happy birthday. Thank you, Robert. You guys are the best. There's another one from Wes Stewart for $10. Thank you so much. It's so great to have all your guys' support because I am breathing hard still from being Trump. Yeah, not even close. All right. So do you want to do the announcements?
I'll do the announcements. Tonight, 10 p.m. UK time, we have Life on Earth with Robert Naser, I believe. So that'll be 10 p.m. UK time tonight. And tomorrow, back at it with the Daily Objective and the reality show. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Matthew. And thank you to the people behind the scenes. Great show. Thanks to everybody. Oh, and remember, check your premises and have good premises.